But she's like, have a photographer there, take some pictures. And then it's like, she may live a week. She may live a month. She was going to be born like December-ish. It's like she may not make it to Christmas. Like she was giving us some reality. But she also said, but we're going to do everything we can to get her there. So that was the first time we felt hope from...
The first time.
Many of you may remember when in 2024, Joe Biden invited a woman named Kate Cox to join him at the State of the Union address to share her story. And the way that her story was framed was that she had to flee her home state of Texas, where she would not have access to the abortion she supposedly needed, and she had to go get that quote-unquote emergency abortion in another state. Now, it turns out that her baby had been diagnosed with a rare condition called Trisomy 18. She was told this made the baby incompatible with life and that the only treatment for this would be abortion. She was also told that it would endanger her future ability to bear children if she went ahead with the pregnancy. So this was framed as her receiving life-saving care that she was denied in Texas because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Well, today, I have a powerful conversation with a family who received that same diagnosis but took a very different path. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to the Leopards. When they learned they were pregnant with their precious Adelyne, they received that same diagnosis, Trisomy 18. They were also told that this made her incompatible with life, and they were advised to get an abortion. But because they're Christians and because they believe that Adelyne was made in the image and likeness of God and had a right to life, and they believe in the sanctity of life, they pushed back against that and they advocated for life for their daughter. And they knew that this meant maybe she would be born stillborn. Maybe she would only live a few minutes to a few weeks. But they were willing to walk through it and embrace whatever the Lord had for them. And their journey has been powerful. It has been amazing. And they have seen and testified to the faithfulness of God throughout this whole thing. And several years later, Adelyne is still with us. And you're going to get to meet her today, along with her sister Autumn and Jeff and Cat Leopard. Now, I want to let you know that if today's conversation impacts you and you feel led to give to them, there is a lot of expenses that they have, hospital trips, and they could really use your help. I'll put a link to their Venmo in the description. And I'll also put a link to an Amazon wish list with some items that their insurance doesn't cover. So if you feel compelled and you want to give to them, I know it would be greatly appreciated. But I really hope above all that this conversation really blesses you. I hope that it informs people about this rare condition of Trisomy 18 and how that interacts with the sanctity of life that the Bible teaches. And I think ultimately you're going to find a lot of hope in today's episode. So here's the Leopards.
We met with this OBGYN. She was an amazing person. We found out she was a believer. She actually prayed with us.
She did.
We went in for the ultrasound, and the ultrasound tech took a little longer than normal. And I was uncomfortable. Have you ever had an ultrasound and you're like, I just needed to readjust because my back was hurting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is taking a long time. And then she brought somebody else in. They were looking at our ultrasound for 2 hours?
About 2 hours.
Wow.
But we weren't getting any communication.
Yeah, they were like, well, I need to talk to another doctor. And we were like,
silence was killing me. Silence. Sure. I was like, because, of course, they told us that we were having a girl.
Mm-hmm. They did say, we're like, girl, okay,
we're having a girl. But then they said, but by the way, what
does it say? We see several indications that she has some type of chromosomal abnormality.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were like, okay.
Did you know what that meant at the time?
Well, we knew Down syndrome.
Sure.
We were like, oh, okay. And so we didn't know. And then that's when they brought in the third person. And the third person was like, she has the indications of Trisomy 18. And we were like, what's that?
Yeah.
We had never heard that term
because
before.
We were all told around the last election that is, you have to abort because you will die, and that's a necessary
They used
procedure.
the term incompatible with life.
That's what you were told.
That's what we were told.
So what are you feeling, Jeff, when you hear those words?
That was it was a struggle because immediately when we heard Trisomy 18, Kat pulls out her phone and looks up
Dr.
Trisomy
Google.
18, and then it's like, it's a picture of this cute little baby, and then it goes, incompatible with life. That was the first thing you see.
Wow.
And so she broke down. She just started weeping. and they were like, well, tomorrow you're going to go see this advanced what?
Yeah, so that was our OBGYN said, I went ahead and made an appointment with you tomorrow to go see advanced fetal internal medicine doctor.
Then she prayed with us. She's like, because we don't know what it's going to be. So like she said, I can't go any further. You need to go see an advanced person that can get more details. So then the next day we went, and of course we didn't sleep good that night. And so the next day we went, and and this lady was a totally different experience.
So basically they looked at our ultrasound for a long time, and we went into the office, her office, and Autumn was with us. She was 7 years old at the time. Yeah. And I sat there, then Autumn, and then Jeff, and they sat down. She sat down with us, like she had no like emotion on her face. And she said, well, I have some bad news. Your daughter has multiple heart defects. She has choroid plexus cyst, which are cysts in the brain. She has an SUA, which is a single umbilical artery. Like all these terms that I was like, what? I wasn't a medical expert at the time. And so I didn't know what those meant. But then she said, she has trisomy 18. And you have up to, I think, 2 weeks to abort your child, to terminate your child. Yeah. And Jeff and I and
she literally was looking at the calendar like, we can schedule it today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I immediately, without taking a breath, I went, because I went to Southern, because I studied ethics, and because I grew up where I've always believed in pro-life, it was like, it like smacked me in the face. And I said, no. That's not even an option. Yeah. So you need to tell us another option. Because she only gave us one option.
So did she say like that was going to put your life in danger, or what? Why did they say 2 weeks?
But the state of South Carolina.
Because the state of South Carolina.
You have up to like 26 weeks.
No, I think it's 28. Because I think I was like 19 or 20 weeks along.
It was up to that point.
And then
so
they let
legally...
you abort at the time till like 22 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
And I said, no. That's not even a thought on the tape. Yeah. That's not even a thought in our brain. That's not going to happen.
So I say, well, we choose life. That's what we're going to do. And so...
And then she said, that doctor has like... It was obvious. I don't know if she was... I don't know. Obviously, her worldview is not mine. But she's either jaded or what. She had like no emotion on her face. And I'm obviously she's dealt with a lot of giving bad news to people.
Sure,
but
advanced
there's
fetal,
still like, if you're called to be a doctor, part of taking the Hippocratic Oath, of taking that oath as a doctor, is that you want to try to care and heal the sick. And the way that she treated us, I was like devastated. So I went into an immediate state of shock. But I told her, I said, we want to pursue other options.
Yeah, refer us to someone else. And
so she says, well, our hospital will only provide hospice or comfort care.
Right.
Wow.
And I said, well, we want to go somewhere that will offer intervention. And so she immediately told us, well, you can be transferred to MUSC, which is the Medical University of South Carolina.
In Charleston.
Wow. And so I said, please transfer us now.
Wow. Okay. So you go there.
Yep. We go to Charleston, and Dr. Kristen Campbell, fabulous lady we met. She altered everything. She was the palliative care kind of leader. And she sat down and she says, I want to help get your daughter into this world. And I was like, wow, that was like the first person who said, we want to help.
She has value.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were like, this is exciting, good. And so she was like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And she gave us this whole checklist of things to do and some things not to do. And she said that she had dealt with 4 or 5 other trisomy 18 babies, so she kind of knew the realm of it. And she said, we're going to do our best to many times they're stillborn. So she's like, you can get you a photographer so you can hold your child, because that's a lot of people's story.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Right.
But she's like, have a photographer there, take some pictures. And then it's like, she may live a week, she may live a month. She was going to be born like December-ish. It's like she may not make it to Christmas. Like she was giving us some reality, but she also said, but we're going to do everything we can to get her there. So that was the first time we felt hope from...
The first time. Yeah. But for 2 weeks, that was the most heart-wrenching 2 weeks I've ever had to experience. Jeff actually drove Autumn and me home to Georgia so I can be with my sister and my mom.
She was literally like in... shock. So
of course.
I said, you need to go see mom and your sister. And so I had stuff at church, and I was like, I got things I'm going to take care of.
Yeah.
You go spend 2 weeks dealing with grief because we
Yeah.
were already grieving.
Sure, you're like pre-grieving
Yeah.
because you don't know the outcome, but it's not looking good.
No.
Can you talk a little bit about trisomy 18 for
Sure.
anybody that's unfamiliar with that condition?
Sure.
What is the life expectancy? I know you mentioned very often they don't know if they'll even
Yes.
be born at all.
Yeah, so
Right.
the it's called Edwards syndrome, and if you know, one thing about chromosomal abnormalities is that like trisomy 21 is Downs, but there's also full trisomy, there's partial, and then there is a mosaic. So there's different kinds of trisomies,
Yeah.
and then there's depletion. So there's all sorts of rare trisomies, but Adelyne was diagnosed with full trisomy 18, which means that every 18th chromosome has an extra copy. So she has 3 copies of her chromosome. So basically it just means that usually what they say is that they pass away in the first or second trimester while you're
Right.
pregnant. Not a lot of them make it to third. They said if she or he is born alive, then the chances of them living to a year is less than 10%.
Right. That's it. That
And
was
how old is she now?
Almost 6.
she'll be 6
December
December
17th.
17th. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Quick pause to tell you about our first sponsor, Good Ranchers. I subscribe to Good Ranchers because I love the quality of the meat. It's better than organic chicken, grass-fed beef that's delivered right to my door every single month on dry ice. I stick it in my freezer, and then it makes meal prep so easy. I also love how easy it is to manage my orders. You know, life is busy for me. I travel, I do podcasts, I'm writing books, and I can just pause or move my order in just a few clicks. It's simple and flexible and actually built around my schedule. And I love that as we celebrate the 250th birthday of America, this is what Good Ranchers lives to honor. In fact, all of their meat is born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States. And that really helps support American ranchers. They give to veterans organizations, they're Christians, they're pro-life. This is a no-brainer. Go to Good Ranchers today and use my code Alisa to save $25 off your first order. And just by subscribing, you're going to save $500 a year. But if you want that extra $25 off, use my code Alisa at goodranchers.com. Good Ranchers is American meat delivered. I became aware of your story, Jeff, when you came and presented at the Cross-Examine Instructor Academy. And I was just so impressed with your presentation because you not only shared this story that you and Kat have been through, but you weaved in a biblical worldview and how we can really apply apologetics to it and the pro-life ethic. Because a lot of people in the world, I don't think they understand when Christians are like, no, this life is valuable.
Right.
This life is, this child has been made in the image and likeness of God and has inherent dignity and value and worth and is worth fighting for.
Right.
Whether or not she can contribute to society in the same way that others can.
Sure.
And I think that's what really sets the Christian worldview apart from other worldviews. And so you specifically brought out the worldview of naturalism. Can you talk about how different well, first of all, what naturalism is? Because a lot of people, I think, in our culture today might be adopting the worldview of naturalism or some kind of version of it without even realizing that it has a name.
That's
and
correct.
that it's they're just uncritically adopting it. And so talk about naturalism and how that really goes against the pro-life biblical ethic.
Sure. So one thing I did realize when I first started getting into apologetics was there is no neutral ground. Everyone has a worldview. Everyone has something they perceive and believe. And I know with naturalism, the main premise is everything that you see that exists, in the physical world, that's all there is. Okay. So, and then also with naturalism, it really is based around the understanding of these things have come about through natural law and through, physics and such. And so supernatural doesn't even, not even considered. Supernatural is not even in the picture. And so whenever I was processing, and I wrote this series for my students, we called it The Missing Piece. And what I did was I had like 6 main questions of like who we are, why are we here, where we're going, stuff like that. And then one of them I did was like, how do we treat each other? And so in that, the naturalism worldview, because what I would do is I'd present the naturalism worldview and give quotes from people. So I wasn't just straw manning. And then I would present the biblical worldview and say, okay, which one fits the piece of reality? Which one looks... So like the naturalism really kind of boils down to the no harm principle. Like, just don't kill each other.
Yeah.
Enjoy life, try not to do secondhand smoking, and, be careful when you're driving, just like don't harm people. But there's no basis for why. So that's when I asked the students, I'm like, okay, let's get very practical with this, students. When you're seeing someone getting bullied at school, why is that bad? Why is
Right.
bullying bad? There's just a clump of cells and molecules and matter. So just turn your head and walk away.
Right.
No, as a Christ follower, you go over there and you try to like be a peacemaker. That's what Christ calls us to be, a peacemaker. So I'm like, you go stop the bullying, because as a biblical worldview, that's an image bearer getting picked on. So you go stop it. And so with the no harm principle and naturalism, the worldview really is like harm and love. There's no basis for the difference. So then with the biblical worldview, then I introduced the puzzle piece where we're like, no, we're image bearers of God, and it doesn't matter our size or where we're, the location we're at, the geographical location, it doesn't matter our developmental, I've had several students in my ministry that have autism and such. And so like, it doesn't matter. That stuff does not give you or qualify you. Because I think it was Francis Beckwith, the philosopher. He said, if there's any measure of quality, I'm going to mess the quote up, but he's like, if there's any qualifying qualities of a human based on development, then there is no such thing as equal rights. So basically what he's saying is, the unborn or the elderly or the teenager or the adult, they're all just different developmental stages.
Right.
And so he's like, they're all equal. They're all valued. But if you say the unborn is not valued, now you've qualified something that now you're adding something to it. And so it's something extrinsic instead of intrinsic. And so, yes, then and the night that, Adelyne's at church frequently. And so the night that I taught this, it's what I presented at CIA. And I had to shrink it down because of the 15 minutes. But as I talked, I had Adelyne with me, and the students know her and such. And I said, with a naturalism worldview, Adelyne is a cog in the system. Her molecules and chromosomes are not in the correct order. Her, cells have not been developed as they should. Therefore, the naturalism worldview says she's not going to add to our survival. She isn't really deserves to be heard. She doesn't have value because, she's not going to add anything. And then, so what is the end goal is termination. There's no reason to keep her. And then I was like, with the biblical worldview, however, it doesn't matter. It's because she is human. And then Scott
Klusendorf.
That word, I can't, Scott Klusendorf, he says that, human beings are distinct, living, whole human beings from conception.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's it. Because it's like intrinsically she has value. And then not only that, but like she's living, she's growing. The embryo was growing. Okay. And then the embryo became, did it become something other than human? No, it didn't.
Right.
It was human from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so then the biblical worldview is, well, then she shouldn't have been aborted. She should be given life because she should be heard. She should be valued. And then here's the implication as well. What if someone's in a coma? They're not showing cognitive response or like, rational or moral reasoning, which is what the naturalism says calls you a person.
Right.
Because they take person and body, or person and human body, and they kind of make a dualism of it, and they kind of separate them. It's no. Biblically, personhood starts when DNA is conceived.
Right.
And so with Adelyne, I said, as a biblical worldview, she is valued, she deserves to be heard, and she's made in the image of God, even though she has a chromosomal abnormality.
Right.
So then we chose life. And then, so I was holding her when I was teaching the students that night, and it was powerful in my heart because it's like, this is a living out the biblical worldview is right here physically in front of us.
Right. And sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
obviously, you know, from your lives, it's not always the easy path, but it is the right path.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about this in a moment because I know that lives have been touched
Oh, yes.
by her.
Yeah.
But I want to make a couple of points here because it's really important what you're saying. And I love that Scott Klusendorf gives us kind of an easy way to remember it with the sled argument.
Yeah, the sled, yeah.
You know, it used to be people would say, well, and you know, when we're talking about abortion or something, people would say, well, it's, you know, it's not human or whatever. But really, when you realize the science is that it is alive and it is human, so it's a living human, they could not deny that. So they had to concede that point. So then the argument went to personhood. When does the living human become a person, which is kind of the similar kind of arguments that they used in Nazi Germany against the Jews, interestingly. But if you really think about that, and this is one of the things I've seen debated over and over and over again, and I've never, ever seen a pro-choice or pro-abortion advocate ever win this argument because they can't. So I love that Scott Klusendorf has popularized what we call the sled argument. The S in the sled is size. So if size determines the value or the worth, well, then a 5-foot person is less valuable than a 6-foot person, or a 2-year-old is less valuable than a 6-year-old. We know that that doesn't work.
Right.
So it can't just be size. And then with L, you have that in that sled argument, the L is the level of development. And that is something that's often brought out. It's like, well, if the baby isn't breathing air yet, or if the baby in the womb, you know, doesn't even feel pain yet. You know, I saw this recently with Allie Beth Stuckey's Jubilee debate where they were bringing some of these things out. And she kept coming back to it. Like, so you're saying if somebody doesn't feel pain, you can kill them? And that's just it's where the logic goes. So that doesn't work. And then E being environment, it's like the location of where the baby actually is, whether it's in the womb or out of the womb. Well, that can't determine its value because that would mean somebody that's in one environment has more or less value than somebody somewhere else.
Right.
And then degree of dependency, which is something they'll bring up. Well, maybe the baby isn't worth saving because it's dependent on your body because it's in your womb.
Right.
Well, so are newborns.
Yeah.
So are 2-year-olds. You know, if you put a 2-year-old alone somewhere, they're not going to be able to feed themselves and take care of themselves. So it kind of, if you just follow the logic consistently, it doesn't work. But to your point also with naturalism, you mentioned the no harm principle.
Yeah.
One of the things that really just puzzles me when people talk about morality is they'll try to kind of punt to something like human flourishing or no harm. But all they're doing is describing what they think actually is good and right and what they ought to do. Which I just think you just got to keep asking the question, why is it wrong to do harm?
Yeah.
You know, what standard are you using to determine that? And that naturalism can't answer that question.
Nope.
It absolutely can't. I am so honored to partner with Summit Ministries, which has summer programs for students ages 13 to 22. They're located in Manitou Springs, Colorado, and in Anderson, Indiana. And I get to go every summer and talk to the students about deconstruction, about progressive Christianity, how to know the why behind the what of what we believe. And now is the time for your children and your young adults to take up the mic, to be brave and winsome. And they can do that by going to these Summit Summer Conferences. This is amazing training for your students 13 to 22 years old. Now, I want to tell you about a great deal they have going on right now. And there's very little time to take advantage of this. It'll be gone by March, but you get an early bird discount of $250 off when you go to summit.org. Now, that discount is going to end once we hit March. But if you use my code Alisa, you're going to get $250 more off your registrations for a total of $500 saved. So if you are thinking of sending your student to Summit, now is the time. Try to get that deal before the end of February for the $500 off total. Go to summit.org/Alisa for that $250 off, sandwiched with your $250 early bird. Again, summit.org/Alisa. So, Kat, maybe we'll go to you for this. How have lives been touched by Adelyne's life?
Well, I decided to touch I have friends all over. We were in South Carolina and near Charleston in a small town called Walterboro. And I decided that since we have friends like all around the world, I decided that I wanted to share her story with the social media world on Instagram and Facebook. And so I started like kind of sharing her. Once I got over the shock portion, I started sharing her story in about September after we met with our doctor,
Yeah.
Kristen Campbell,
Yeah.
at MUSC. And we've been sharing her story. She has touched so many lives that I can't even tell you who she has touched. In fact, I have people that write messages to me often and say, "Hey, can you talk to someone? They just got a diagnosis."
Yeah.
I have a friend of a friend of a friend. So I have talked to people in other countries. I've tried to help people. I even helped somebody yesterday
Yep.
who
Wow.
was in Atlanta. You think of like the Bible Belt in Atlanta, you have doctors that have different opinions and different worldviews. And so I'm able to help her. So I think Adelyne has touched stories because I always tell people you're not a diagnosis. You are a human first, and you are God's creation, and you're created in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
So that is your first and foremost thing that you need to remember. And so that she has worth. And I always tell people, and I work with students, I'm in a middle school right now, and I tell them, you have worth, you have value. Don't let anybody tell you any differently. So she has given us a passion and a boldness to share,
Yeah.
but she has also touched so many lives that I have met people at the hospital that I didn't even know knew her, but she says we follow her on social
wow.
media.
Wow.
And I'm friends with your mom, and I've been following your stories since 2019.
Yeah.
So, and then it's just been so neat to hear. I don't know whose lives that we have touched, and I'm not doing it for popularity. I'm doing it for truth.
Yeah.
I'm not, and we get the other side of the spectrum. We get people that have said, why does this mother waste so much time caring for her daughter, fighting for her daughter when she's not going to amount to anything?
Right.
When she was 3.5 months old, the orthopedic doctor told us that they accidentally found a hip dysplasia.
Yeah.
When she had an emergency surgery, long story. And she says, but she doesn't need a brace because of her life expectancy. And that doctor was pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah.
And she was basing it on a life expectancy. And I said, no, ma'am. We base it
when
on
she came in the room, she said, "Is your daughter planning on running a marathon?" That was literally what she said. And I said, and I was just like, and Kat said, "We would appreciate you treating her just like you would any other child who has the potential to run a marathon."
That's right.
And then she was pregnant, and it just shocked me because I'm going, what if she got this diagnosis?
Because as if running a marathon is the determinative of the value of life.
So what was funny was she was like, well, and then she gave us the brace. It was like a rhino. What was it?
It's called a, I don't know.
It was some brace.
Padlock. It's some kind of brace. It's been a long time.
Her legs were like
all scrunched up.
Yeah.
It looks like overalls.
Okay.
Yeah, and your changing diapers were that was really hard. But we had to have it for 7 weeks.
Wow.
And and she said, well, week 3, if it just gets too difficult, just take it off.
Just throw it away.
And she said, and then we said, so we kept it on all 7 weeks. We never took it off. And we went back to that doctor and she did the x-ray again. And she said, well, her hips have gone back into the position, so Kat was like, so the brace did what it was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, yeah. And you could see she was just so
almost upset.
Yeah,
that
it worked. And then whenever she left, we were like, because I told her, I was like, honey, do you want to go to a different doctor? And she's like, no, I want to show this doctor that Adelyne hip dysplasia can show her, no, Adelyne should be treated just like any other child.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the first time that I really started realizing that I was going to have to advocate.
Yeah.
And I was going to have to learn the difference in being aggressive versus being assertive.
Yeah.
Because I've had to be careful because I can get angry really quickly and really fast. So I'm learning very quickly. I've learned since 2019, how to be assertive and how to take deep breaths and how to process things before I react and respond, because we've been dealing with doctors that don't have the same worldview as I do. We've been dealing with nurses that don't have the same worldview since every time she gets hospitalized.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was just one of those situations that I was like, okay, it's time for me to go into mama bear mode. And it just has been really interesting to see how this has helped me, not only for our family to advocate for her, but also to advocate for other parents and to advocate for students that need support and that want their voice to be heard.
Well, and I would imagine that it's had a profound effect on your students, right?
Sure.
I mean,
That
to be interacting with her and to her being a part of the community I'm 100% don't even have to ask. I know that has
been.
strengthened their understanding of the biblical worldview, the love of Christ. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And also as well, just walking around at the mall or walking around, in the store, and, she has a feeding tube kind of hanging down from her wheelchair. And so, like, as we're pushing her through, you'll see these kids, like, they'll like keep looking at her, and then we'll just stop and we'll be like, do you want to meet her? Like, cause with kids, they're just curious, and the dad's like, no, let's keep going and keep going. And I'm like, no, it's fine. You can let's let her meet her. And then I'll pull her shirt up and say, see, you know how you eat with a spoon? Like, she can't eat anything in her mouth. She has to eat like this. I was like, is that crazy? Like, so I'm just like talking to the little kids, at the mall, and they're just like, they're learning, and their worldview is being like, oh, wow, some people eat with a tube.
Yeah.
I didn't know this. And so specifically at our church with my students, they care about her. They know her. They say hey to her. And she gets really vocal whenever she's awake. And so it's funny because she loves loud noises.
Oh, wow.
Because she can't hear but up to it has to be like 50 decibels or something. So during the music time at church, where we sit at, we're kind of close to one of the speakers. So she's like loving it, And then, the preacher will get up there. He's an awesome guy, our pastor. And he'll start preaching, and then she'll kind of like doze off because the music's gone, and then she'll go, stuff like that, and then people kind of, would look and they smile because they're like, they know it's Adelyne, It's not like it's an annoyance or a disturbance. So back when we were in Walterboro too with our church, so many people had like never experienced, a special needs kid in the church. So they were just like, how do we do this? And then for VBS, they didn't even consider Adelyne,
Wow.
And I'm on staff at the church, and I'm like, maybe Adelyne can just, go in the kindergarten class or something. And so it's been good too to show just the folks at our church to kind of broaden their worldview to say there are special needs kids. And
it's no longer, my sister-in-law, Jackie, said, it's no longer when you get a special needs person in your church. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
sure.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
because we already have a ministry and need for it. We have kids that are autistic, that have ADHD, that have medical needs and things like that. And so it's no longer if, it's when. And churches have to be more accessible and more, they need to.
I think we've
help in that
seen like
area.
some churches are getting on board with this.
They have.
I'm seeing like a trend
they have.
in that direction. It would be great to see that more. Well, can we meet
Yes.
Adelyne? Let's
Sure.
meet her.
Yes.
Well, I hope you can see by this powerful conversation how important it is for Christians to use not just our voice, but our dollars to stand up for the unborn. And this is one of the many, many reasons I love 7 Weeks Coffee. 7 Weeks Coffee is an unapologetically pro-life coffee company. In fact, that's baked into their name. At 7 weeks of gestation, the baby is the size of a coffee bean. And that's when you can first detect a heartbeat on an ultrasound. And this is why they give away 10% of every sale to pro-life organizations all across the country. And thanks to so many of you guys who have subscribed to their coffee club, they've given away over $1 million. If you've never tried 7 Weeks Coffee, this is a great time to do it. Go to 7weekscoffee.com today, and when you subscribe, you're going to get 15% off for the life of your order. But if you use my code Alisa, you're going to get an additional 10% off your first order. So that's 25% total savings on your first order, plus you're going to get a free gift. So go to 7weekscoffee.com today and use my code Alisa. All right, we've got Adelyne and Autumn, the big sister here. Wow, beautiful dress. I love it. What a sweet, sweet girl. Oh my goodness. What do you think, Adelyne? Lots of lights. So, Autumn, talk about what you were feeling when you learned about the diagnosis.
I was confused. I was like, oh, I don't know this kind of like what's it called?
Diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know like what to do, like what's gonna happen. And when mom was like checking, like when she was seeing if it was a girl or a boy, I was like, I hope it's a girl. And and they came out and they were talking to me and they were like this weird face and they were like, so she has blah blah blah. She has trisomy 18 and it's this type of chromosome where she has like she's smaller, she might not live.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was only 7, so I
Wow.
was like,
Yeah.
I was confused to
Yeah.
what was that.
Do you have any advice for, because, you know, I would imagine, Autumn, that you've had to make sacrifices and that can't
Yeah.
be easy. Do you have any advice for other siblings of children with special needs?
Well, you have to be patient. you have you have to well, kind of like, oh, she can't do anything. Like, what do I do with her? You can like sit with her, or I I like to um sometimes do her makeup or
Mhm.
do her hair just for fun.
And you did her hair today?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I pick out her outfits for church sometimes.
Autumn, when we first heard about the diagnosis, Autumn said, "Am I going to get what? Am I going to get to play with her?"
Mm-hmm.
So when she was about like 2 years old, and that when Adelyne was like 2, she was so little, and Autumn was like, "When am I going to get to play with her?" Like
Mhm.
that was really
Sure.
hard for her as like a 9-year-old going, and so it is difficult to
Yeah.
deal with a sibling who is like nonverbal or non uh,
Sure.
active.
Yeah, it's
course.
not the same. And the thing that has been really hard is that we try to make sure that Autumn gets equal love and care. And
Mm-hmm.
we make sure that she's a cheerleader, she does dance. We make sure that she gets to do the things that she's able to do, all the things
Yeah.
still. We don't want her to miss out because since 2019, we've all been dealing with sort of anxiety. Just mental health has been really difficult, and we've had to be very authentic and just genuinely like, hey, I'm struggling. And she gets really anxious. So now whenever she hears 3 words, it kind of puts her into anxious mode. It's when she hears like Adelyne is sick,
Mm.
she immediately becomes downcast
Mm.
because she knows that life is going to be different.
Yeah.
That daddy and mommy are going to be taking turns at the hospital.
Yep.
That I may have to stay with my aunt. I may not be able to do this. We're going to miss out on this. So it becomes very difficult. And we know that she has a hard time with that, but she has been becoming very mature, and she's very honest and real about her struggles of when she is struggling. And
Yeah.
she's very just like, she's learning to be able to speak up about it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Jeff, I want to ask you a tough question.
Oh,
that
boy.
I think that a lot of people might be thinking, you think about where this all fits into the gospel,
Mhm.
and a lot of people might even be wondering, why would a good God allow something like this to happen?
Sure.
And I know you've thought about that question.
Definitely. Yeah. And I would use tactics and say, "What do you mean by good?" But no,
That's the apologist brain.
no, I have seen so much good. The ripple effect that is mentioned in many apologists say, maybe this bad thing happens, but then the ripple effect of good comes from it. And so I've told people before as I've talked to them about Adelyne, I think God allows birth defects for his glory. I think he does, because in it, I mean, I've met many special need kids, especially kids with Down syndrome. They hug you. They love unconditionally. They don't care like what you look like or what you smell like or what they're your friend.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they have the cognitive ability is not necessarily, dependent on their image of God. It's they are human. And so with Adelyne and having discussions with people, why did God allow this? I think we've been able to, like I've told Kat this before a few years ago, I was like, we've been able to share the gospel with 50 more couples than we
Wow.
ever would have, because they'll call and they'll say, my cousin just got diagnosed. Can you talk to them? And then we say three things. We say, number one, choose life.
Yeah.
We say, number two, are you a part of a local church? If not, you're not going to make it. You need, like, you've got to have support. And then I was like, number three, get transferred to a hospital that has trisomy friendly physicians. You've got to do those three things. And then many people are like, well, I don't really go to church. And I'm like, well, why not? And then we kind of get into the gospel conversation there. But like, it's been really cool to see how God has used Adelyne just by meeting people, like I said, at the mall, meeting people, coming to our church. And I was teaching the other day kind of our new members class. We call it Next Steps class. And I was introducing myself and such, and I was teaching. And then one of the kids, one of the people there was like, oh, yeah, you're the guy that pushes the wheelchair around, And I was like, yeah, that's me, So it was like they recognize, here I am a staff member, and I'm, pushing Adelyne around. And so people come up to her and such. And so the Lord has really been glorified through her life.
Yeah.
And there has been people's worldview hopefully changed. And we don't know. We don't know how people have been impacted by her, but I do know that, the gospel is God, sent his son down the cross and for a fallen world that has birth defects.
Mm-hmm. Well, her very existence sort of challenges the naturalistic worldview.
That's it.
Because, if somebody's going to be consistent, it's easy to say, oh, you should abort when you can't see the child, when the child isn't sitting right here on your lap. But carrying the logic through consistently, to have to face as somebody that may be coming from a naturalistic perspective, like that, there's undeniable beauty in this.
Sure.
Yes,
There's
there is.
undeniable value in this. You can see it in Autumn's life as much as I'm sure you've been through a lot because of it, and all of you have. But the beauty of it is undeniable. And so I think it's so much easier, I think, for people to sweep it under the rug when you can't actually see and interact, like when the baby's still in the womb. But I think it's just beautiful what the Lord is doing through your life and in the lives of your students, your family. Is there anything else that any of you would like to say to anybody watching?
There's something that I always try to tell anybody, because there's a Facebook page that where anybody can come on and ask a question. It's a rare trisomy page. There's also an Edwards syndrome page. And so people will get on and say, I just found out this diagnosis, I need help. And so sometimes I don't always, I just pray through if I'm going to comment, because I don't always comment, but sometimes I just pray and I'm like, I need to say something to this person. And whenever I've talked to people, I always say, like, why did you choose life when you found out when you were pregnant with her? Why didn't you just terminate? And I said, well, number one, that's not what I believe. I believe that she has worth inside of I don't care how far she's along. She has worth, and she is made in the image of God. And I tell them it's better to grieve than to regret. It's better to grieve a life that you've loved, even though this is not going to be an easy life, even though it's going to have problems and it's going to be difficult. I would rather grieve her knowing that I have loved her so well, instead of regretting not giving her a chance, because doctors are not God. They don't know. I mean, they don't know. You cannot qualify. You cannot say that someone is incompatible with life without knowing. And so many people, so many doctors just tell people just to terminate. And this life is difficult, and we deal with so much, and we deal with having to drive back and forth from the hospital. We deal with having financial struggles, just because, it's been difficult for us, but it is worth every second of it, because her quality of life has been amazing. So another thing that I will say is that she gets hospitalized for cold. So she's immune compromised. She goes into respiratory failure within a few hours. So we've decided to do homebound for her instead of bringing her to the school, because she just gets hospitalized so much.
Okay.
So she actually is a kindergartner, but she's not physically in school. She has a teacher that comes and some therapists that come. And whenever she gets whenever she gets a cold, she gets really, really sick. She needs lots of oxygen. We're either calling 911 or we are driving her to the ER ourselves, which is about an hour away. The number of days that she's been in the hospital, like if you're going to base it on the number of days you're in the hospital off of somebody's quality, like how many days is she suffering versus how many days is she thriving? Like she's been in the hospital. The longest hospital stay she's ever had is 3 months. She was intubated. She almost didn't make it then. It was 2 years ago. An average stay is usually 7 days, 7 to 10 days.
Yeah.
So she has stayed in the hospital for probably a couple hundred, maybe 200 days or more. But according to that, opposed to in contrast to the other days where she's at home and she's laughing and she's doing well, that's not a comparison. You can't compare the number of days that she's in the hospital. You can't use that as determining somebody's worth. Like her worth is when she gets sick, she gets really sick. When she's well, she's really well.
Yeah.
I would say some advice is, I know part of the naturalist worldview says that children are a burden.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, yeah, sure. But as an adult, like, what do you mean by burden? Like, I think Adelyne is a blessing, and many people would say, like, we abort because, I've got this career, or I've met other people with special needs kids and they have a really hard life. So, like, I don't want to do all that. I don't think, and so, yeah, because you're not trusting God.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we would have made it this far without our hope and our faith in Christ and how he strengthens us and gives us, great church family around us, and then my family and Kat's family, and how we get support through them and such. We would not have made it if we hadn't have come this far. And so is Adelyne a burden? No, she's not a burden, Like, she may seem a burden to many people, but they don't realize her worth and her blessing and how that actually fuels our hope. It really does.
Well, the hardest things in life sometimes are the most meaningful. And, even just having a typical experience with a newborn baby is a burden. It's a burden to take care of a newborn and not get sleepless nights and all of that going on. So I think it's beautiful. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come. Where can people connect? You mentioned that there's an Instagram page where people can follow along the journey. Can you tell us where to find you there?
Yes.
We use hashtag Adelyne Leopard Strong.
Yes, I haven't made, I actually just use it on my page, Cat Leopard.
Well, we'll put a link to that Facebook page in the notes. And I just want to encourage everybody to follow along and pray for the leopards. I want to thank you guys for being here. And let's remember, as we pursue Christ, to keep a sharp mind, a soft heart, and a thick skin. We'll see you next time.
So pray for me and I will pray for you. No turning right or left, we'll make it through. The road that's narrow and the gate that's small. Don't give up, it's gonna